All right, here we go again. Can't believe I'm gonna do this again. Today we're talking about the Fiorenzato Pietro grinder again. I reviewed this grinder last year after I had been using it for about 6 months. I've had it now for about 18 months. I get a ton of questions about it, and Fiorenzato has made some updates to it. I have obviously several of them. This is the first one that I got. It has the M-Modal Burrs. This one also is a first round Pietro with the B-Modal Burrs, and this one is a brand spanking new one with the updates, also having the M-Modal Burrs. All of them came via my partners at Espresso Parts. Fantastic team there. Love that crew. If you are looking at one of these, Espresso Parts is going to have a discount down there in the description. And they're also doing something that I think a lot of people thought Fiorenzato actually should have done from the get-go. More on that later. And you guys know I'm always committed to giving you my honest thoughts about a product, and I think in this video that's going to be especially obvious. Now, I heard about this grinder before I ever actually saw it, and as soon as I heard about it, I got very excited about it. You know, flat burr hand grinder, very innovative, very different. Then I saw a picture of it. Looks very cool, very sleek, kind of modern design. Then I heard that the legend himself, Lance Hedrick, had input into designing one of the burr sets that was going to come with this grinder. So I was very excited to get my hands on one and use one. Then I went to SCA, which is a Specialty Coffee Expo in 2023, got to go hands-on with one myself, and the result was kind of disappointing. Grinding with it, as you saw, was very awkward. I dropped the catch cup off once, spilling coffee grounds everywhere. I had issues getting the lid off. It was really difficult to do. And I thought, okay, there's a learning curve to everything. We can figure this out. This is gonna be fine. So Espresso Parts sent me with these 2 units, and that experience never really got a whole lot better. And I just thought, you know, I'm just gonna keep using this grinder until I find something better. And I just couldn't find anything to match the clarity, the mouthfeel, the overall cups of coffee that I was getting from the Pietro. And here I am, like 18 months later, still using this coffee grinder, often for at least one of the cups of coffee that I have pretty nearly like every day, which is so maddening to me because there is so little in me that actually enjoys the experience of using this grinder. Like, it looks great on the shelf. When you're drinking the cups, it's fantastic. And everything in between is just really brutal. But the cups are unbelievable. Okay, so this is a washed Ethiopian landrace that's actually grown in Tanzania at a farm called Gaia Farm. It's roasted by Hatch Coffee. This is a very delicate washed coffee, very nuanced, and I'm having like grape and like cranberry jumping out, getting like a lot of tea-like vibes, very delicate, and you can just pick out those flavors with a really nice, gentle, silky mouthfeel as well. No astringency, amazing brew, so good. And a big reason for that is actually the burrs that are in these grinders. You can get the B-Modal burrs, which are in here. They're an all-around burr. You can use them for filter and espresso. They kind of give you these nice rounded cups, flattering, good tasting, great balance on espresso and filter, solid cups of coffee. That burr set comes in at around $450. That's right, we haven't even gotten to the price yet. For that price, these burrs are definitely delivering you cup quality, but there are a lot of other grinders that will deliver you also great cup quality with a way better ergonomic experience and at like half the price, or in some cases even less. Still, the cups are great. And if you're curious to grind a shot of espresso on this, it takes in about around a minute. Twice as long as something like K Ultra, but also shorter than a Comandante. For me, the shining star of the Pietro grinders is hiding in here, and that is the M-Modal Burr, the brew burr, they like to call it. This grinder grinds the cleanest, clearest cups of filter coffee of any hand grinder that I've used. A lot of people compare this grinder to the ZP6. In my opinion, this is going to give you better flavor separation and a nicer mouthfeel than that grinder. As far as grind time, it'll take me 30 to 40 seconds usually to grind a cup of filter coffee. And on espresso, you know, it's really not intended for espresso. You, at the very finest setting, you can just barely squeak out sometimes a cup of traditional espresso. You really don't have the fidelity, though, to dial in to any kind of meaningful laser focused sweet spot. Now, as far as turbos, that is a little bit better. I do not enjoy the turbos enough to put up with the nuisance of grinding a turbo shot on this burr. Filter though, I come back to this grinder again and again and again, and it drives me crazy. One thing that I do really actually like a lot about this grinder, it's kind of ingenious how this works. You press this button here to rotate the burr assembly and it just pops out. And when you're using this grinder, you're kind of intuitively worried about alignment of the burrs. You know, alignment is very important for flat burrs. You want them to be totally parallel to get that grind uniformity. As you're cranking around on this thing, you're just thinking like, oh, this leverage that I'm putting on this burr is going to be throwing off the alignment. Like, isn't that a really weak point in the design? But what they've done is very smart. When you put this burr in, this locks in to these metal tabs around, and it's just solidly in there. And when you're actually using the grinder, this is not actually spinning at all. It's locked in place, and this is just spinning around like this. And even if you can kind of pick up a little bit of movement, this part is locked in place. And it's actually the back burr that is spinning, kind of perfectly seated in its little home there. And when you're adjusting the grinder, when you're going finer, there's a little plate in here that is going to push that back burr forward. And then when you loosen it, it's not going to spring backward on its own, but as soon as the beans are in there and kind of getting ground up, they're going to force that burr back. And it's all sliding along this very tightly toleranced bearing slide chamber. It's a pretty innovative solution for alignment. That does lead me though to one learning that I've had with this grinder over using it for the long term. That lubrication that is in that bearing slide chamber eventually will kind of wear out, dry out, whatever. So you're going to want to make sure that occasionally you lube that up with just the tiniest amount of food safe grease to make sure that that bearing can move smoothly. It's not going to bind up and kind of get stuck at maybe a finer grind setting than you're intending. Also, because of this design, cleaning is like super fast and something that is a lot more difficult on other hand grinders. So when I'm brewing, very often I'll just open it up and clean it out before I brew a really nice limited coffee or whatever. And it really is so fast that it doesn't even feel like an inconvenience in your workflow. But that is basically the only thing that doesn't feel like an inconvenience with this grinder. The magnets on the bottom here are kind of loose, so if you're futzing about with the grinder in any kind of way, the cup can just drop off. Dosing into a portafilter with just this is really awkward. I find these channels for the magnets, you know, if you're pouring out of here too quickly or the wrong way, beans can get stuck up on this channel, and most of your grounds will pour into either your pour over dripper or whatever, but sometimes some will kind of spill over the edge like that. So a couple things there. Once you get the beans in and start grinding, it's just not a very nice experience. It looks great, and it really seems like ergonomics wise, they put form over function here. The handle is not very long, so it kind of just sticks partway into your hand. And even though the feed rate is slow with the amount of force it takes to turn the flat burr, especially with light roasts, it's gonna like catch and bind up and twist and turn, and then you gotta rewind it a sec and then try and like push through that, and it's just really unpleasant. Also, there's not a lot of clearance right here. If you're doing it this way, you're gonna be wrapping your knuckles on the counter. But it's kind of funny, like you go online and you see people trying to come up with all these little tricks to convince themselves that it's not really that bad. You know, they'll say, grind on a silicone mat, hold it like this and it won't twist. Oh, it's not true at all in my experience, actually. Or some people will do like this fishing reel type move. You know, I have found the best way is definitely to put it on like a corner or a counter, and you want to grind so that your hand is kind of hanging over the edge here and it's not going to hit anything, give you a little bit more clearance, give you a little bit more leverage. But then if you're left-handed, you know, I don't know, are you supposed to go backwards? Like, I'm just not totally sure. For me, it just seems like anytime you need to do some of this less intuitive stuff to actually make something usable, it's not the greatest situation. And as soon as this thing came out and people started using it, they started making the very obvious observation that it should have shipped with like some sort of like stand or something. And after many months, Fiorenzato released this, an add-on pack which contains a stand. It also contains a dosing funnel and a brush. And because they realized the error of their ways, they started including this add-on pack with every new Pietro sold. Just kidding, they didn't do that. They're gonna charge you $65 for it, which really got people riled up. Thankfully, the team at Espresso Parts, they include this add-on pack as kind of like a bonus when you buy a Pietro, so that's great. And there are a few other updates too that Fiorenzato made to the Pietro, you know, getting the lid off on the new ones, it's so much easier. There also is an O-ring now around this housing right here to, I guess, keep any grounds from escaping. The stand though, I really feel like we got to talk about this stand. It does work. It makes the grinder better to use, more stable, but it's also kind of funny the way that it works. You would think that you're just going to slide your grinder into the stand, but you don't. You put the top in like this, and it is a pretty stiff fit, and then the catch cup goes in the bottom like that, which is kind of cool. Okay, I get that. You know, you can kind of pick it up with the stand and pull the catch cup off, but it also looks kind of bad on any other grinder color besides black. Like, for how much attention they put into how good this grinder looks, you would think that they would have offered the add-on pack in colors to match the different grinders that they sell. Now, I've used the stand, it does make it better. For some insane reason, I don't like using it. I don't like the way it looks. It makes it take up more space where I store it, and I just prefer to deal with it. And even when you are grinding with a stand, it is more stable by a long shot, actually, but it still is not the most comfortable. You know, it doesn't do anything about this handle. The clearance is still not great. It can be a little tricky to grind with, especially if you're doing very light roasts, but at least it's not flip-flopping all over the place. Overall, the things that people were really complaining about and were somewhat easily fixable, Fiorenzato did fix them. All those things aside, the taste, for me, is worth it. Oh man, it just is such a good cup. And that really is the beauty and kind of the paradox of this grinder. I can't stand using it. Like, it is so annoying. To even make it kind of passable, I need to put this big ugly stand on it. It's not even the same color as the grinder I use all the time. If I don't want to use the stand, I'm dealing with it twisting and turning and jamming and unjamming, and it doesn't feel nice in my hands, but I keep coming back because of the cups for like 18 months. Now, one thing that I did notice when I got the updated model is the brews weren't quite as nice. I wasn't getting the clarity that I was hoping for. I was finding astringency coming in a lot more to the cups. I was even having like mud in my coffee beds, which is very unusual given my experience with this grinder. So because I test a lot of grinders and I do this a lot, my brain immediately goes to something called Burr seasoning. And what that is basically grinding a lot of coffee through a grinder to kind of wear down some of those rough, jagged edges from manufacturing that can make your brews not quite as nice. Then my brain goes back to a lot of conversations that I've had with people in my DMs and posts that I've read on forums about people dropping almost $500 US on a Pietro. And not really liking the brews they're getting out of them, saying they're not getting clarity, they're getting astringency, they're getting very long drawdowns. And the taste is just not what I had experienced over time. So I start to wonder, like, are all these people just using grinders that are not properly seasoned? So I started asking around, asking longtime owners, like, hey, when you got your Pietro, how long did it take before you were getting really high clarity cups? And the consensus seems to be somewhere between 3 and 5 kilograms worth of coffee ground through your Pietro. Now, that is a lot of coffee for seasoning a set of burrs. You know, I would season SSP burrs with 5 kilos of coffee in an electric grinder. It's a little tedious, but you can do it in an hour or two. With how poor the grinding experience is on this grinder, I am just not willing to go there. Thankfully, you can take the burrs off with some simple tools. I'm just going to take the burrs out of the grinder that I've already seasoned and just drop them in this new body. Suffice to say, if you get one of these grinders, you are going to need some time and patience to get those brews to their full potential. And despite all those things, here I am still using it, still brewing with it, almost every day. This is going to sound crazy. I even travel with this thing. I haven't even gotten to this yet. It weighs like 1.5 kilos, 3.5 pounds. So as far as hand grinders go, this thing is like gargantuan. Like, honestly, this video could be like a comedy sketch, but the cups are the reason why it has stayed as one of my most used pieces of equipment that I have. It's clear, it's nuanced, the flavor separation is crazy, better than any other hand grinder I've used, certainly. You have this nice silky mouthfeel, beautiful presentation in the cup. So I just can't bring myself to relegate this grinder to the back of my shelf and use something else that's a lot more enjoyable to use that honestly will get me most of the way there. Like, I'd say a ZP6, it can get you like 85% of the way there. I just can't do that when I know that this is sitting back there and I'm just leaving something on the field clarity-wise by not using it. Now, at this point, there's a whole other conversation that comes into play, and that is around clarity in your cup and pour over coffee in general even. People get really hung up on clarity. You see it basically dominating discussion online about filter coffee. And in my experience, absolute clarity in your cup is not always something that you want, or necessarily even something that is even desirable, because it will just pull apart all the flavors that are hiding in there and put them out on your palate for you to examine and experience. Now, on a very delicate, very high quality coffee, that can be very nice because, you know, you've spent a lot of money on this very small amount of coffee. That is not every coffee. In fact, even some really nice, highly processed coffees are gonna have, you know, some little parts of the flavor profile kind of embedded into that coffee bean as a result of that flavor processing that might be really enjoyable when blended up like a smoothie or a milkshake. But when you kind of pull them apart and examine them individually, it might really not be the most appealing. Any defects in the coffee, it's a very similar picture. A little bit too much on the coffee roast. Again, that could be blended up and be like, you know, toasted marshmallow or like creme brulee top on a more blended grinder. And on a very high clarity grinder, it just tastes like, ooh, that's a little ashy, you know, or a little burnt or whatever. And it's for that reason where I consider a high clarity grinder as a complementary tool rather than a primary tool for your coffee experience. And that's not even getting into, you know, body and mouthfeel. A lot of people like a nice thick cup of coffee, and this type of grinder is not going to give you that. Like, on the whole, compared to other grinders, it still is going to be a very light cup. So I don't typically recommend hand grinders like this as your only or especially as your first hand grinder. And I really think it is best when paired with another hand grinder that gives a more rounded profile. You know, something like the Espresso K Ultra or the Comandante C40 seem to be two real industry standards in this way. They're a lot less expensive than this grinder, but they're still quite expensive. There are a lot of really relatively inexpensive hand hand grinders that will give you a nice, well-rounded cup, you know, in at around the $100 or just under mark. So if you enjoyed this video, you loved hearing about this grinder, I would love for you to subscribe to my channel. Honestly, it's the best way that you can support me making more of these videos. And now I want your take on the Pietro. I want to hear what you think about it in the comments, both for and against. If you're an owner, make sure you drop your experience down there in the comments too. I always love hearing those. I hope your next cup of coffee is as good as this one, and we'll see you next time. Dang, that is a good cup of coffee.